You write in your introduction to Rationality that some people believe analytical thinking must be subordinated to social justice. And were there any examples in particular that you had in mind in writing that, or are there any that come to mind now where people have held this belief?
Oh my goodness! Yes, it's kind of becoming it's the ascendant attitude in universities.
Hmm.
Um, the beliefs such as do men and women differ on average in their cognitive or personality characteristics? Are police shootings racially biased? Um, is there such a thing as rapid onset gender dysphoria? And are there social influences in the massive growth of transgender adolescents or pre-adolescents? Good luck in saying that we should try to get to the bottom of those answers by looking at data. Those are cases where merely uh, uh, proposing, even asking those questions, can sometimes teach people, and there can be efforts to cancel them
Right.
for this. The acceptable belief is the one that aligns with certain supposedly social justice objectives.
And I mean, it's somewhat ironic that to argue that analytical thinking must be subordinated to social justice requires analytical thinking to do so. But just to play devil's advocate with some of these cases, maybe, are there not cases in which this might be the right thing to do? I mean, you write that we ought to follow reason, but I'm asking if you think that there are places that we oughtn't follow it, or if you can at least reconstruct the opinion or the views or the beliefs of the quote unquote social justice warriors who do feel this way and give them a charitable case.
I mean, I think the most charitable case is that if someone is willfully ignorant of particular facts in order to pursue a clearly harmful agenda. A Nazi who really believes that Jews are a parasitical race, contrary to any kind of evidence. You, it is legitimate not to give them, credit for simply believing something for which there's a lot of evidence, or that Africans are inherently suited to slavery. I think nowadays one doesn't have to indulge that belief because the consequences are so harmful, and the epistemic basis of the belief so uh, not even tenuous but non-existent, that one can attribute malevolent motives to people who are wall themselves off from obvious evidence that their beliefs are false. Um, but I think the widest possible berth has to be carved out for analytic thinking, reason, rationality, simply because the basis for social justice has to be a factual understanding of the world: who is suffering, who isn't, what will make people's lives better, what will make it worse, what are the causes of current suffering, and how can we best alleviate them. And the fact that in history, a lot of the great movements towards social justice did not blow off reason. Quite the contrary, as I showed in the final chapter, they made very rigorous analytic arguments. Frederick Douglass was an orator, not just in the sense of the music and poetry of his speech, but he was razor sharp in showing why the case for slavery at the time was completely bogus. Likewise, the case for democracy as opposed to absolute monarchy, the case for the political equality of women, the case for the civil rights movement in the 60s, the case for gay rights. You didn't have to marginalize reason, and reason was on the right side.
Hmm. And you mentioned that within the academy, within universities, these social justice issues are standing in the way of analytical thinking. And in this sort of toolbox of rationality, you mentioned we have, I mean, logic, critical thinking, probability, decision theory, all of these things. Your colleagues at Stanford, Yale, Princeton, all of these places, many of them are highly educated and skilled in these areas, but at the same time, they might believe that rationality should be, or analytical thinking should be subjugated to social justice. And what is the pitch that you would make to try to sway them from this view?
Well, that they themselves, in pursuing that argument, are committing themselves to objectivity, rationality, reason. Um, if not, then the rest of us are free to blow off anything that they say. And since they probably don't want everyone to blow off what they say, they have to make the case that they're applying reason to make the arguments that they're making. So that's number one. Number two, that they themselves have to be committed to certain empirical, objectivist, realist um, commitments in making their own sacred arguments, like, is climate change real? Is racism pervasive? Are vaccines effective? Is human activity warming the planet? Um, in all of those cases, they would reject claims that we should subordinate reason and evidence to moralistic thinking. And historically, again, I would bring up the fact that it was never necessary to repress speech in order to advance social justice. In the case of the civil rights movement, slavery, women's empowerment, and so on. Quite the contrary, it was repression of speech that often was used against the forces of social progress in their day. It was the advocates of abolition who were often criminalized, or of gay rights.